The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with a mix of pride and condescension. Massive beings, adorned in their regal attire, lounged in floating chairs or stood imposingly by their holographic displays. Each represented a species that had long solidified its place among the stars, their advanced civilizations spanning millennia. Today, they gathered to address an issue that demanded resolution, but their focus wasn't entirely on the matter at hand. Instead, their gazes lingered on the lone human, standing in stark contrast to the extravagance around him. He was unremarkable in appearance compared to the other delegates. Where alien diplomats flaunted bioluminescent robes, metallic armor, or shimmering scales, he wore a simple black suit. No medals adorned his chest, no weapons hung at his side. Yet, he carried himself with a calm confidence that was difficult to dismiss entirely. The way he walked, measured and deliberate, seemed to command attention without asking for it. The human was their representative, a species that had only recently emerged from its small blue world, barely scratching the surface of interstellar exploration. To the Council, humanity was a species of infants, barely crawling, still fumbling with technology that many of the gathered races considered obsolete. They were fragile, emotional, and bound to fail under the weight of the universe's complexities. The Eldra, a tall, serpentine species whose silken voices carried an air of perpetual mockery, whispered among themselves. This is the best they could send? A prey species sending their cub to a predator's den, one murmured, her silver eyes gleaming with amusement. The others chuckled in agreement, their laughter cold and cutting. Despite the murmurs, the human remained silent. He stood at his assigned podium, hands folded, his expression unreadable. To some, it was a sign of meekness, a quiet submission to the overwhelming superiority around him. But to a few, those who observed closely, there was something unsettling about his stillness, the way his eyes scanned the room with precision rather than awe. The Galactic Council moderator, a massive, crystalline being with a voice that reverberated through the chamber, finally called the meeting to order. The matter at hand involved the Vorik Empire, a race infamous for their brutal expansionist policies and penchant for bullying weaker species. They had recently blockaded the trade routes of a smaller, technologically inferior race, demanding tribute that bordered on extortion. The Council had intervened, seeking a peaceful resolution before the conflict escalated into open war. The Vorik representative, a towering figure with jagged, obsidian-like armor plating his body, smirked as he addressed the Council. "We acted within the bounds of interstellar law," he growled, his voice carrying a deep, guttural tone that echoed through the chamber. "The Karents sought our protection, and we merely asked for fair compensation. If they now find our terms harsh, it is not our fault they lack the backbone to negotiate." The statement drew murmurs of discontent, but none of the Council members dared openly challenge the Vorik. They were a species known for their ruthlessness, their military might capable of decimating entire fleets. To defy them was to invite annihilation. The human diplomat listened intently, his face betraying no emotion. When the Vorik representative glanced in his direction, his smirk deepened. "And what does humanity think of this? You are new to these halls. Perhaps you do not yet understand the intricacies of diplomacy." The taunt drew soft chuckles from other delegates. The human's lack of response seemed to confirm their assumptions. He was out of his depth, unfit for the complexities of interstellar politics. As the Council deliberated, the human remained silent, his presence almost forgotten amidst the larger-than-life personalities dominating the room. Yet, those who took the time to look his way noticed something peculiar. While others gestured wildly or raised their voices in passionate arguments, the human stood immobile, his gaze fixed, calculating. The Eldra delegate, amused by the human's stoic demeanor, leaned toward him, her serpentine body coiling gracefully. "You do realize you're little more than a spectator here, don't you? Your kind is ill-equipped for matters of such gravity." He turned to her, his expression calm, almost indifferent. "We observe. We learn." His voice was steady, unremarkable in tone, yet it carried a weight that seemed to unsettle her. The Vorik representative, emboldened by the humans' apparent meekness, continued his grandstanding. He described the necessity of their demands, painting a picture of benevolence twisted by the current's unwillingness to comply. "They should be grateful we did not take more," he sneered, his sharp teeth glinting under the chamber's light. Finally, the council turned to the human, expecting little more than a token statement to fulfill protocol. The moderator addressed him directly, their crystalline form shimmering with faint anticipation. "Representative of Earth, do you wish to contribute to this discussion?" The human nodded once, stepping forward. The room fell silent, if only out of curiosity. "Humanity understands," he began, his voice quiet but clear, cutting through the tension like a blade. "We understand the Vork's position. They see an opportunity and take it. They see weakness and exploit it. It is, after all, the way of predators to prey upon those they perceive as lesser." The Vork representative chuckled, his laugh a deep, guttural rumble. "At least you recognize your place in the hierarchy, human." The diplomat's gaze shifted to the Vork, his calm exterior unbroken. "We understand the dynamics of predators and prey well. Perhaps better than you assume," the council murmured, intrigued by the human's measured tone. The Vork's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered, his voice dripping with condescension. "And what would your fragile species know of such dynamics? Your kind is new, untested, a mere insect beneath the boot of the galaxy's true powers." The human tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Humanity knows what it means to be underestimated. We know what it means to face extinction, to fight against odds that should have destroyed us. We've learned, over centuries, how to survive. And survival teaches lessons that civilizations like yours often forget." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The room, once filled with the hum of quiet mockery, fell into an uneasy silence. The Vork representative, for the first time, seemed unsure of how to respond. The human stepped back, his expression returning to its calm neutrality. "We are here to mediate, to ensure peace. But do not mistake our desire for diplomacy as a sign of weakness." The council sat in stunned silence, the human's words leaving an impression far deeper than any had anticipated. For the first time, the Galactic Council began to see humanity in a new light, not as prey, but as something far more complex, something not yet fully understood. The council chamber was still recovering from the human diplomat's words. For all their confidence, the delegates were not accustomed to such an assertive tone from a species so new to the galactic fold. The tension was palpable, yet no one dared openly challenge the human's claim. The Vork representative, however, refused to let the human's remarks linger unaddressed. "Impressive speech," the Vork growled, his deep voice cutting through the stillness. "But words alone don't change realities. You speak of survival, but we've seen what your kind brings to the stars: weakness, disorder, and an inability to adapt to the natural hierarchy. You claim knowledge of predators, yet I see no teeth." The human turned his gaze toward the Vork, his calm expression unchanged. "You see no teeth because you haven't looked closely enough." The room seemed to hold its collective breath. The human's words were simple, yet they carried a weight that even the most hardened delegates couldn't ignore. The Vork's obsidian-like armor shifted as he leaned forward, his piercing eyes locked on the human. "Are you suggesting that humanity is a predator?" The human's response was measured. "I'm suggesting that humanity knows what it means to be underestimated, and we know how to use that underestimation to our advantage." The implication was clear, and the council members exchanged uneasy glances. The Vork, however, refused to back down. Bold words for a species with no history of conquest, no significant fleets, and no standing among the galaxy's true powers. "Tell me, human, what exactly do you bring to this council besides empty rhetoric?" The human diplomat didn't flinch. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward, his eyes meeting the Vork's without hesitation. "We bring perspective. We bring adaptability. And we bring the knowledge that sometimes survival isn't about having the biggest fleet or the sharpest claws. It's about knowing when to strike and where." The chamber grew even quieter. The Vork's smirk returned, though it was tinged with unease. "Is that a threat?" The human's lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. "It's a reminder." Before the Vorak could respond, the moderator intervened, their crystalline form shimmering with faint irritation. "Enough of this posturing. We are here to resolve the matter of the current blockade, not engage in a contest of egos." The human stepped back, his expression neutral once more. "Agreed. Humanity has no desire for conflict. We are here to ensure that all parties find a solution that benefits the collective good." The council resumed its deliberations, though the tension lingered like a storm on the horizon. The Vorak, despite their bravado, seemed slightly less assured, their earlier dominance dulled by the humans' unexpected resolve. As the discussions continued, the human diplomat observed silently, his mind working behind his calm exterior. He noted every nuance in the arguments, every subtle shift in tone and posture. The Vorak, for all their bluster, revealed more than they intended, hints of desperation masked by arrogance, cracks in their seemingly unshakable facade. When the opportunity arose, the humans spoke again, this time addressing the council as a whole. The Vorak claim their actions are justified under interstellar law, but their interpretation of that law is flawed. The Kharan sought protection, not subjugation. By blockading their trade routes, the Vorak have not only violated the principles of mutual cooperation, but have also undermined the stability of this council's authority. The Eldra delegate, still skeptical of humanity's place among them, interjected. "And what would humanity propose as a solution? Surely you don't expect the Vorak to simply relinquish their position out of the goodness of their hearts." The human turned to her, his tone unwavering. "Of course not. But there are ways to resolve this without bloodshed. Humanity has learned that the greatest victories often come from alliances, from uniting against a common threat rather than tearing each other apart." His words resonated with several delegates, many of whom had grown weary of the Vorak's unchecked aggression. The Kharan, represented by a timid, insectoid figure, looked toward the human with a glimmer of hope. The Vorak representative, however, refused to yield. "Alliances? Cooperation? Your naivety is laughable. The galaxy respects strength, not hollow ideals." The human met his gaze, unflinching. "Strength comes in many forms. You may have the largest fleet, Vorak, but even the largest fleet can be dismantled if its enemies are united and determined. Humanity understands this. Perhaps it's time the rest of the galaxy does as well." The council chamber buzzed with whispered conversations, the humans' words sparking a mixture of intrigue and uncertainty. The Vorak, for all their bluster, were no longer the sole focus of the discussion. Humanity, once dismissed as insignificant, was now a wild card, unpredictable, and far more capable than anyone had anticipated. The human diplomat stepped back once more, his presence a quiet yet undeniable force. The council's deliberations continued, but the balance of power in the room had shifted. Humanity, for the first time, was no longer seen as prey. The council's proceedings had reached a critical juncture, the air thick with anticipation and unease. The human diplomat stood silently now, having said all he needed for the moment. The Vorak representative paced at the edge of the chamber, his armored frame casting long shadows against the council's glowing walls. His frustration was evident, his earlier confidence now replaced with a simmering rage born from the human's steady dismantling of his arguments. It was the Zorith delegate, a creature of shifting light and translucent forms, who finally spoke. Their voice rippled through the chamber, a melodic hum that conveyed both curiosity and wariness. "Human, your rhetoric is compelling. But if the Vorak were to withdraw their blockade, what assurance is there that this council, or any other, could prevent such disputes in the future? You speak of alliances and consequences, but what framework do you propose for lasting peace?" The human turned toward the Zorith, his tone measured but resolute. "Lasting peace isn't built on treaties alone. It's built on understanding and the willingness to act when that peace is threatened. Humanity proposes not just words, but a shared commitment, a recognition that the strength of this council lies not in its individual members, but in its unity." The Zorith seemed to shimmer more brightly, considering the response, while the Vorik laughed, a harsh, guttural sound that echoed through the chamber. "Unity," he scoffed. "Unity is a lie the weak tell themselves to feel strong. There is no unity in the face of power. There is only survival of the fittest." The human's gaze shifted to the Vorik, calm yet piercing. "If survival of the fittest is your creed, Vorik, then you've already failed. The fittest aren't those who crush others beneath their heel. They're the ones who adapt, who evolve, who find strength in collaboration. Your way of thinking is outdated, and it's why your empire will crumble, if not today, then soon." The Vorik's smirk faltered, if only for a moment. Bold words from a species that crawled out of its cradle mere centuries ago. "You assume much, human. But assumptions are dangerous, especially for those without the means to back them." The human didn't flinch. "Dangerous assumptions indeed. Like assuming that humanity's lack of fleets or armies makes us defenseless. Or that the silence of others in this chamber means they fear you. The galaxy is watching, Vorik, and you've miscalculated. Your actions have made enemies of more than just the current." The murmurs among the delegates grew louder. The human's words had planted a seed of doubt, not just in the Vorik, but in the minds of every species present. The current, emboldened further, spoke once more. "The Vorik's strength is not limitless. Their fleets stretch thin, their resources dwindle. We know this because we have endured their onslaught. But endurance alone is not enough. If this council truly values peace, it must act." The Eldra delegate, ever skeptical, leaned forward, her crystalline features shimmering with cold detachment. "And what would this action entail? War? Sanctions? Both carry risks, especially if the Vorik respond with greater aggression. Do we trust humanity's assessment enough to gamble the stability of this council?" The human turned to her, his tone unyielding. "Trust isn't built overnight, and I don't expect you to trust humanity blindly. But look at the facts. The Vorik's aggression threatens not just the current, but the balance of this entire region. Today it's a blockade. Tomorrow, it could be one of your worlds under siege. If this council doesn't stand together now, it sets a precedent, one that says aggression will be tolerated, even rewarded." The Eldra's gaze remained steady, but there was a flicker of something, doubt, or perhaps realization. She said nothing, but her silence was telling. The human pressed on, addressing the chamber as a whole. "Humanity understands the cost of action. We've faced it countless times in our history. But we also understand the cost of inaction. It's a price no one here should be willing to pay." The Vorik, unable to contain his frustration, slammed a clawed hand against the table before him. "Enough of this. The council will not be swayed by the ramblings of an upstart species. We are the Vorik. We take what is ours, and no one, not humans, not insects, not this council, can stop us." The chamber erupted into chaos, voices clashing as delegates argued and debated. But amidst the noise, the human remained calm, his expression unreadable. When the uproar subsided, he spoke one final time, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You've made your position clear, Vorik. But you've also revealed your greatest weakness, your arrogance. Humanity has no fleets, no armies. But we don't need them to defeat you. Your empire will collapse under its own weight, and when it does, we'll be there. Not as conquerors, but as survivors." The chamber fell silent, the weight of the human's words settling over the delegates. The Vorik said nothing, his defiance tempered by a growing unease. For the first time, he seemed to realize that his power was not as absolute as he had believed. The human diplomat stepped back, his point made. The council would deliberate further, but the tide had shifted. Humanity, once dismissed as insignificant, had proven itself a force to be reckoned with, not through might, but through resolve. As the deliberations continued, the human diplomat observed the shifting dynamics within the chamber. The initial defiance of the Vorik was now tempered with visible unease, and the once fragmented council had begun to align, their discussions turning more pointed, their arguments sharper. The Vorik's dominance, which had seemed unshakable at the start, now appeared fragile, exposed under the weight of scrutiny. The Kwarathi delegate, a species known for their cautious neutrality, finally addressed the chamber. Their voice, resonating like a low hum, carried a rare note of resolve. For too long, we have chosen the path of inaction, believing it to be safer than intervention. But safety is an illusion when faced with unchecked aggression. The Vorak have overstepped, and if this council is to retain any credibility, it must act decisively. This declaration sent ripples through the assembly. The Kwarathi were rarely so direct, their words carrying significant weight. The Vorak representative growled low, his claws tapping against the table in barely contained frustration. You speak as if your words hold power, Kwarathi. But do you have the strength to back them, or will you hide behind rhetoric like the human? The human diplomat turned toward the Vorak, his expression unyielding. Strength isn't always about who fires the first shot, Vorak. Sometimes it's about who can rally others to a common cause. That's what you fear, isn't it? Not humanity's fleets or weapons, but the alliances we've begun to forge. You fear that the species you've bullied and exploited will finally stand together. The Vorak leaned forward, his voice a low snarl. Fear? The Vorak fear no one. You think your words can undo centuries of dominance? Your alliances, if they even exist, are fragile at best. When tested, they will shatter, and you will stand alone. The human met his gaze, unflinching. Maybe. But even if we stand alone, humanity has never backed down from a fight we believe in. We've faced extinction before and survived. What makes you think this time will be any different? The chamber fell into a tense silence. The delegates exchanged glances, weighing the human's words against the Vorak's defiance. Slowly, the Eldra delegate rose, her crystalline form catching the dim light. The Vorak's arrogance has blinded them to the shifting balance of power. Perhaps they are correct that alliances can be fragile, but they underestimate what desperation and shared purpose can achieve. This council was formed to prevent precisely the kind of unchecked aggression the Vorak represent. If we do nothing, we betray our purpose. The Vorak slammed his clawed hand against the table, his frustration boiling over. You speak of betrayal, but it is you who betray the natural order. The strong survive, the weak submit. That is the way of the galaxy. The human's voice cut through the outburst like a blade. The natural order? That's the excuse of every empire that has ever fallen. The Vorak are no different. You think your strength makes you invincible, but strength without wisdom is a weakness. You've overreached, and now the galaxy is watching. If this council chooses to act, it won't just be humanity or the current standing against you. It will be everyone you've wronged. The murmurs in the chamber grew louder, the humans' words resonating with species that had remained silent until now. The Vorak, sensing the tide turning, tried one last gambit. This council is fractured, divided by petty rivalries and self-interest. You think you can unite them against us? Foolishness. Even now, they hesitate, afraid of the cost of action. The current delegate rose, their voice clear and defiant. The cost of inaction is far greater. We have endured your aggression, Vorak, but we will endure no longer. If this council fails to act, we will fight, alone if we must. But we will not bow. The human turned to the chamber, his voice steady. The Vorak want you to believe that resistance is futile, that standing together is impossible. But history has shown us otherwise. Empires fall when the oppressed refuse to stay silent. This council has a choice, to be remembered as the body that allowed tyranny to flourish, or as the one that stood against it. The silence that followed was heavy, the weight of the decision palpable. Slowly, one by one, delegates began to signal their agreement. The Vorak representative glared at the human, his defiance giving way to a simmering rage. This is not over, human. You may have swayed the weak, but the Vorak do not forget. Your species will pay for this insolence. The human's response was calm, almost cold. Perhaps. But humanity has faced worse threats than you.